Welcome to Merryfield's Gardening Advisor, brought to you by the experts at Merryfield Garden Center. Join us as we discover beautiful plants, new trends, and exciting ideas for your landscape. So let's get growing together. Merryfield's Gardening Advisor, bringing out the best in your garden.
Welcome, everyone. Happy May. Here we are with a brand new month, a great season. I'm Debbie Warhurst-Kapp.
And I'm David Yost. Glad you could be with us this morning.
We are so glad you're here because we've got a great show for you today. It's going to be a great weekend to plant. You know that we had that rain all week. We're hopefully finished with that. So we've got some great weather. We've got some great planting. And
you know, it's really been great weather for the plants.
Yes.
I mean, the cool weather, the rainfall and everything, it's been fantastic for gardens. It's just been a little hard on us trying to find time to get out there.
Exactly, exactly. So today we have a great show for you, especially if you're into growing your own herbs and vegetables, or if you're wanting to get started with that, because you've got everything we need to know.
We're going to cover as much of it as we can, and there's been a lot of renewed interest in this. I have a lot of new gardeners coming in, probably more than ever this spring. People have been coming in just asking tons of questions about soil preparation, getting started. People that are new to growing vegetables and herbs, and I think it's a wonderful, wonderful trend that we really want to promote and keep going. So we're going to review some of the basics, like I said, on the timing, the planting, different methods for gardening, soil preparation, pretty much everything you need to do to get started on growing your own herbs and vegetables.
And you don't have to have a large amount of space anymore.
No, not all. We'll touch on whether you do want to do big traditional gardens, whether you want to grow in containers. And we're not talking about producing all of your food.
No.
You know, a lot of us just don't have the time and space to do that. But whatever we can do to supplement our diets, even if it's just, like I say, growing a little bit of parsley or a few salad greens, I mean, it's very rewarding.
Well, there's some interesting things going on, you know, with new recipes and that type of thing. We actually have a recipe we'll share with you later on in the show. So we've got a lot going on. So grab a cup of coffee, cup of tea, and sit back, get your notepad ready, because we've got a lot of information for you. And we will be taking phone calls later on in the show. So before we get started, I just wanted to, first of all, invite you all to come into Merryfield Garden Center. I tell you, we were bringing plants to bring in yesterday. So last night I was running around the garden center picking up things, and I'm just struck by the just massive amounts of beautiful, colorful plants that we've gotten in. So please come by and take a look. It's a perfect time to shop. The weather, we'll get into that a little bit, how we deal with that with some of these plants. But it's a great time to get to the garden center. And we hope David and I will be both back at the Fair Oaks location this afternoon. So come on by and see us, because that would be great.
And and I was thinking a couple people have mentioned to me they actually avoid the garden center on the weekend because they feel like it's too busy. And that's the last thing you need to do. I mean, we have people out there to clear out and make extra parking spaces. We bring added cashiers in. We do everything we can to move you through.
Absolutely.
It gets a little crazy there, but we are ready for you. And as Debbie said, we've got all the plants and we got the people. We're love to have you come down and visit us.
And it's fun, all the excitement of everybody being. It's just so nice to see everybody. So.
I mean, the people watching is as much fun as looking at the plants and flowers.
Absolutely. And we've also expanded our hours on Sundays. So we're open Monday through Saturday from 8 to 8. But on Sundays now we're open from 8 until 7. So that gives you a couple of extra hours. So, we'll do that for the next several weeks type of thing. But please come by and see us. It's great. Any of the locations. So, and I also wanted to mention, this is our first weekend actually without our seminar, because we've had that going on all winter, and we end those usually by the 1st of May. But do join if you haven't already, our email mailing list, because a lot of times during the summer we will have various workshops going on and that type of thing, and that's our best way to let you know about that. So go to the website, merryfieldgardencenter.com. All you have to do is fill out a little information thing. You can do it in the stores when you're there, but it's a great way to get information. We usually try to send something out, every other week, depending on the season, as often as we can. And, of course, the social media is so much fun. We hope you're following us on Facebook. I love, the pictures that Sharon's been posting.
Just exchanging
and that type of
pictures
thing.
And photos and things.
So it's great. So, do join us. There's a lot going on. Right. Now, before we get started with our fun vegetable type thing, you guys at the Plant Clinic have been pretty busy.
Oh, always busy at the plant clinic. And like I said, and I don't want to discourage anybody, because we are going to have lots of pretty fun things later in the show, but I'm going to start out with something kind of ugly. And I do this because, as everybody knows, that's kind of my primary interest in gardening, oddly enough, is some of the ugly parts and when things go wrong. But this is what's called black sooty mold. And I'm not exaggerating if I'm saying I've been having 3 and 4 people a day coming in with this.
I'm not surprised.
And that's why I thought would be an appropriate thing to put on our TV show. A lot of this showing up on hollies primarily, but you will find black sooty mold, like I said, on almost any kind of plants. You find hollies, yews, crepe myrtles during the season, and so on. And what happens, the sooty mold is not actually a plant pathogen, but what it is, it's a secondary problem that's a result of what we call piercing, sucking insects that suck sap out of the plant. And as they're withdrawing the sap from the plant, they secrete this sticky residue, honeydew, and then the sooty mold starts growing on there. The sooty mold does block some sunlight, reduces photosynthesis. But this is what really gets everybody's attention. So they come in, they're like, wow, what's going on? The leaves, the plant, the stem has just turned black like this. Well, in this particular case, the pest that's causing that is called a cottony camellia scale, and we're just seeing tons of them this year. So if you're seeing that black sooty mold occurring on the plant, and you'll see this mostly on hollies, camellias, and yews, if you turn that leaf over and on the underside, this is the actual insect that's causing the problem. Now this is a magnified picture. You can see that's the midrib of a holly leaf going on there, give you an idea how small these are. So you might even need a little 10x lens, or you can see them with your naked eye if you look closely at it. But this is not easily recognized as an insect. It's on the underside, and like I said, its mouth is stuck in there. It's a little stylet, and it's just drawing sap out of the plants, secreting the honeydew. The sooty mold starts growing on that. You might even see residue of their egg cases. What happens, this is the adult camellia scale, but in about a month's time, or really later this month, they'll start laying their eggs. Their eggs are about the size of a grain of rice, and you might even see some of these kind of white cottony masses. And each one of those little masses might have 200 or 300 eggs in there. And then they lay those eggs in May, and then the immatures start hatching out about June time period. So all this is going on right now. So the big question is, what do I do about it when I find it? Well, you've got a couple different control options. Something that you can do right now is to spray them with this all-season spray oil. The oil is a natural product. It kills them by suffocation. So essentially you have to get good coverage. You're trying to spray the bottom of the leaves, the top of the leaves, the stems, the twigs. Get good coverage on there. And you need to do this on a dry day. But then what it will do, that oil covers them and suffocates them. Now the fact of the matter is you're probably not going to get 100% coverage and 100% control. So along with that, I do like to use the Bare Tree and Shrub insect and protect and feed. This is a systemic product. This is actually soaked into the ground. It's absorbed up through the roots and then kills the immature ones as they start feeding. So it usually takes a few weeks for that to kick in, but my thinking is, hey, if you've got a bad infestation, you can spray the oil. You could complement that with the systemic insecticide, which will catch any of the next generation that you might happen to miss with the oil.
Great. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to get back to the beauty and the deliciousness of gardening. So we'll be right back.
The bugs are interesting, too.
They are, I know.
Right. Okay.
Hi everybody, welcome back to Mary Field's Gardening Advisor. We've got a great show for you today because we're talking about growing yummy herbs and vegetables. And I think a lot of people just don't want to deal with it because they think you've got to have this big amount of space and it's a lot of work and that type of thing, but that's not the case anymore.
No, we're, like I say, really just trying to simplify it all today, because I say, hey, even if all you do is grow a little bit of lettuce or a couple plants of basil, anything you do to supplement your diet is fantastic.
Absolutely.
Just participate in your own food chain in one way or another. I think it gives a lot of appreciation for where food comes from, a lot of appreciation to farmers that grow this commercially, because you're going to find it really really isn't all that easy. I mean, it does take some knowledge, it's some good experience, but it's so rewarding. I mean, if you don't work for things, there's really no reward for it.
And it's great for the kids too, getting the kids involved,
Absolutely.
especially if you've got like on your deck or on your porch just a a pot with some tomatoes or some herbs.
Because as we know, our parents both grew up in farms. I mean, in our generation, our parents came on farms. The kids are coming in now have very little exposure to this, and so that's why I say it's just wonderful from every possible perspective.
Right.
So first thing I want to say, as far as getting started, this is an interesting time of year right now. We're kind of in this, I say not exactly, but a little bit of a limbo, meaning that in our climate here in Virginia, we have cool springs like this, we can have hot summers, the seasons change pretty dramatically. And that's a real plus for us because we can grow cool season vegetables, things like, lettuce and beets and cauliflower and broccoli, and we plant those sort of in March, April time period. And then as we start migrating into May is the time we start focusing on our warm season vegetable, things like beans and cucumbers and peppers and tomatoes. So it takes a little bit of experience to coordinate between the different plants and crops you're growing.
Right.
So what I have up on the screen right there is trying to show the average last killing frost in spring. And so in a typical year, if there is a such thing as typical, and that's the catchy part, somewhere in that April 20, April 30th time period, depending exactly where you live, means that's going to be the last killing frost we have of the year. Now, what I wanted to emphasize is you can still get cold damage even when temperatures are above frost.
And I don't think people realize that.
No, they don't. And we're getting a very good lesson on it this year with this strange spring that we're having. And what will happen is, if you've got, there's so many variables. A lot of times, if we have tender plants that have been coming out of the greenhouse but haven't fully acclimated to the outdoor life, and if you get dramatic change in temperature, you can still see some damage even though it's staying above frost. So my point is, we do want to get started on our summer crops. We do want to get growing our warm season vegetables, things like tomatoes that everybody loves. But we're in this little bit of a limbo area where you still need to be a little careful with these. You still watch the weather forecast, and when we have chilly nighttime temperatures, be able to cover or protect those plants.
Right.
A lot of us are growing in containers now instead of living on the farm. We live in apartments and townhomes and condos. So if you're in container, maybe you can even need to be prepared to bring that container inside. So things like tomatoes, peppers, and squash is another wonderful one there. So I'm just saying, have fun. Now there's a squash. That is a squash. And that was my friend Salsa Mike, as we call him. He's been a regular customer for us, and he grows his phenomenal vegetable garden and then brings the bounty of the garden in to share with us. So that's the beautiful Karen Valahosky modeling
so nice
the
to
squash,
model it for us.
but it was Salsa Mike that grew the squash. But the thing is, I really want people to have fun with this. It doesn't matter how old you are, you're going to have fun growing that type of thing. So as far as getting started, you can talk about either growing from seed or growing from transplants. And what will happen if you're, say, growing transplants, and I just brought a couple in there for examples, you might want to come in, and like this is a hot pepper that's there. That's the ghost pepper. It's supposed to be super hot.
Put some of these up.
Chili pepper, another. I don't grow the hot peppers. I like spicy food, but it doesn't like me.
There we go.
The nice thing about buying these transplants, of course, is these plants are already 8, 10, 12 weeks old, so it allows you to get a jump on the season, get a head start. But there are other plants that grow so quickly, things like beans, for example, that they can be direct sowed in the garden. And the nice thing is when you have, if you're growing from seed, of course, we have this big selection of seeds. So things like, I think we've got there corn and cucumber, and I say beans are one of the easiest things to grow. We have this big selection of seeds that are in there. So just depending on what you're growing and your time frame and how much space you have, you can plant either transplants, or seeds. It's time to get started on that, but again, with that little bit of a caveat saying, hey, keep an eye on the weather, and you might need to protect things, or it's a very much plant by plant, and we've got the specialists and people can help you with that.
Right. So
I'm saying it's time to get started, and the first and most important thing you can learn about vegetable gardening is in the soil preparation. You need to have good, healthy soil if you're going to have good, healthy plants. So I'm going to go through a super quick little thing on that. So we'll just start with our pictures here. Or maybe not. There we go. I'm just trying to say, hey, look, good productive vegetable garden like that, where we want is a soil that's got the balanced nutrients, but also it needs to be friable. It needs to be loose and well drained so air and water can infiltrate in there and roots can grow in it. And that's the biggest thing with our clay soil. It's so dense and so compact, we really have to break that up and mix a little bit of compost into it. So this is more of a traditional garden bed layout. And if you got the space, go for it. That's fantastic. But we'll just go through these pictures here one by one pretty quickly. Let's see, next picture comes. So as I said, the first thing is kind of mechanically need to break it up. This is my old garden from years ago when I had space. You know, it doesn't, if it's a big area, a rototiller might be a nice way to do that, but a lot of times, so we're talking about small gardens, you know, if it's less than 500,000 square feet, I'm saying don't bother with the tiller, just do that by hand, turning it up. And as you're physically breaking that up, we want to get organic matter in there. We want to get some type of compost. And here, this is hairy vetch that I'm tilling into the garden. It's what we call sort of a green manure. This would be an example of just making your own compost where you're taking yard waste and kitchen scraps, putting it in the bin. If you have the ability to produce compost, you know, that's really fantastic. If you don't have a bin, you can actually compost straight in the garden. You can take your garden waste and actually just layer it in the garden bed, let it sit for a while, and just turn that in and basically compost in place. So I'm just saying, get organic matter in there in one way or another. If you don't have the time, the space, the resources to do your own composting, of course, you can come in and purchase compost from us. And we literally sell probably 10 different kinds of compost. This is out our Fair Oaks location. We set up this display showing a selection of organic compost specifically well suited for vegetable gardens. There's a school of thought out there that says, hey, the more different types of compost I can mix together, the more diverse that mix is, then that's going to give me more balanced nutrients, better soil biology. So like in that picture you're seeing there, you know, we had, you know, the leaf grow, which is composted leaves and grass. We had composted manure, lobster compost, mushroom compost. And I'm trying to talk to people. There's no one best compost. And a lot of new gardeners are coming and asking about soil preparation. I said, this is like cooking. Everybody has their own recipe. So you can go in there and you can buy those individual types of compost, mix them and blend them together. You also saw in there that was called bumper crop, or there's a Dr. Earth vegetable mix. Those are premium blends. They've already pre-mixed it. They've taken worm casings. Worm casings is the word I'm looking for. You know, compost, seafood, forest compost, and they blended it together. So you make your own recipe and go in there, mix a little this, mix a little that. You can buy the bags that are already pre-mixed. Just
it can be that
get
easy.
Compost in the garden one way or another.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break, come back with some different styles of garden. Hi everybody, welcome back. We're talking about veggie and herb gardening because it's not your great-grandmother's vegetable and herb garden anymore. It's today's modern, whatever you'd like to do, herb garden.
And we'll just start out some pictures because again, this is something we want to encourage everybody to get started with. So we'll go straight to our pictures, just showing you different ways to create a vegetable and herb garden. And again, there's no rules to this. It can be however you want. You know, this is sort of a traditional kitchen garden. This is actually the Inn at Little Washington. You know, highly renowned restaurant. And one of the ways that they get there is by growing a lot of their own produce. That's how they get special varieties, get straight to the table. Those are artichokes growing in the background. So yes, you know, you can even do things a little crazy like that. Beans in the foreground, greens in between, doing sort of more traditional bed layout. They even have their tomatoes growing along the fence. So they have maximized every square foot of that garden. So that is just a beautiful way to do it. A lot of people like doing the raised beds. One of the things that happens is sometimes our soil is so dense and so hard and so compact, and it takes so much labor to break it up and dig. you can just build your beds up. It makes it easier than going down. It also makes it a little easier to be able to harvest the crops, because you don't have to stoop over as much.
Right.
Get very fertile, productive soil in there. And it's kind of neat in this one. This is out at Green Spring Gardens Park. I always like to give everybody recognition for the good work they're doing. And I love those hoops there because you can actually put a cover over there to extend your season, protect it from weather extremes. I'm just envious. I wish I had one of those that's out there. You can easily grow in containers, and this is what I'm saying. We don't always have the time and space to devote to growing, a lot of vegetables as much as I would love to. This is out at Peggy's yard, where she works. Her constraint is she's limited the amount of sunlight.
Right.
Most of these things do require sun. Some of the greens you can grow in part shade, but most things need sun. So she grows hers, a lot of them in containers, so she can move them to where the sun is.
Absolutely.
And one of the things as far as growing containers, my own vegetable gardening, which has become greatly diminished, is now down to the size of an earth box. But the earth box, I'm like totally into convenience and ease because I just have such limited time available for these things. Earthbox is really a neat system that came out. You can almost see it's on rollers, so I can move this around the deck. It's essentially a self-watering pot. There's a little reservoir down there that holds the water. So even in the heat of summer, I maybe have to water this 2 to 3 times a week instead of every single day, which some of the containers need. And that was Swiss chard growing in there.
Well, and it's right outside your kitchen door. So, you just pop out on your deck and get what you need, and you're good. And
I brought this in to show this is the Earthbox Junior. So even, within that, you just mix and match to your lifestyles there. And I love these because, as Debbie, you can almost see in there, the bottom of it, there is a little reservoir at the bottom that holds about 1 or 2 inches of water in there. And that water sucks up from the bottom through capillary action. So it just makes it easier to water and keeps the moisture consistent.
It's a nice little size, too.
Right. Now, if you need soil, if you're doing raised beds, for example, and you need to bring soil in, we do custom make our own topsoil. And what we're doing, basically, we're taking the native soil, we shred it, we screen it, and then we mix and incorporate compost, about 25% in there. So if you're talking about buying in bulk, that's a very good way to get it. But sometimes we only need to get a few bags of soil. And one of the things that's been nice is the industry has really, really responded very much to the interest in growing vegetables and herbs. And we have a big variety of organic potting mixes now. I just brought in the Pro Mix and the Fox Farm. There's a couple others. Because a lot of people, when you are growing, I know that you want to grow organic, and that's one of the main reasons for doing it. So just try and put it out there that we have the options. And so even after you've got the soil, when you're vegetable gardening is a production system, you want to sort of keep everything going. And there's a lot of different organic fertilizers that you can use. The ones that I tend to use, I've had really good success with myself, is I like to use this Garden Tone at the time of planting. I'll mix that in the soil, and then I like to use the Neptune's Harvest periodically about every 6 weeks through the growing season. Again, that's not meant as an absolute rule, that's just my suggestion.
Guidelines.
Right, and I really love for people to experiment and try to find their own recipes.
Well, we brought up to the table here all different kinds of basil, and boy does it smell great in here now.
Yeah, it does, and I knew that I wanted to move a little away from the general and talk about a couple specific herbs and vegetables that you can grow. Now, basil, I just brought this as this isn't even the full collection that's out there. Basil is the #1 herb in America now, and so like everything, we've developed all these different varieties, which Debbie's showing you right here.
There must be, 8 here, right? Just
exactly.
What we've got right
I think
here.
there's like, cinnamon basil, holy basil, Thai basil, spicy globe basil, the Coloner basil, the sweet Genovese basil, lemon basil, if I didn't already say it. They're all fantastic. And, it's one of my favorite herbs to grow as well. Now, the thing I'm going to say about basil is this loves the warm weather. Even on these cold nights that are going down into the 40s, we're still bringing the plants in to keep them protected. So it might be just a tiny bit early to put basil out there, but it does so well in containers and pots. I mean, you can go ahead and plant it up, but just need to give that a little protection. It goes into the evening. Now, I think, like I say, basil likes the warm weather. It likes pretty consistently moist soils, not necessarily wet, but it doesn't like dry. And this is a plant that I think even does a little better in part shade. I found a little spot in my backyard by the downspout where the water comes out,
Oh, perfect.
and it just thrives back there. It gets a little bit of protection from the hot afternoon sun, so it does really, really well there. But basil's fun to grow, whether it's in containers or in the ground or whatever.
Right.
Super, super quick, because I'm going to run out of time here. I'm already out of time. But I wanted to just introduce, the good thing is all these wonderful varieties that we have. Maybe the not so good is we have been having problems with what's called this basil downy mildew. This is a new pathogen in a sense. It was first found in this country in about 2007. It's kind of become more widespread from there. What you'll see on the surface of the leaf sometimes is that light yellow patchy growth. You flip it over on the underside and you kind of start to see that purplish or grayish mold on the underneath. This really seems to come with warmer, more humid weather conditions, so we haven't really encountered it yet. But kind of keeping a watch out for it.
Right.
And I think the best thing you can do for this is make sure you have good air circulation around there so the leaf doesn't stay wet for a real long time. Give the plants a little space to grow. And if you have a good growing environment, it doesn't need to be a major problem.
Great. Okay, we've got to take another little break, and we will be right back. We're focusing on growing yummy herbs and, easy for me to say, herbs and vegetables today. We talked a little bit about the herbs, so let's talk about some of the popular vegetables.
Yeah, and I tell you, there's just so many more that we don't have time to go in. That's why you have to come into the garden center.
That's right.
But I'm just picking on really the most popular, and of course, America's #1 vegetable for home growing is the tomato. Exactly, and so needless to say, again, we love tomatoes, so we have just almost countless varieties.
Oh, yes.
I mean, literally, I think at one point in time they cataloged over 3,000 varieties of just tomatoes. And that's what's so much fun is you got to try all the different ones that are out there, and you're just kind of constrained by space.
I think you usually pick a new one every year, don't you?
I try to. I absolutely do. And so over time, like I say, you sort of learn what your favorites are. But this is just a picture to sort of show the variety of shapes and sizes and flavors that will match in there. So with this, there's been a renewed interest also in what are called heirloom varieties, and that's for the most part what you're looking at there. Heirloom varieties just means that they're old varieties that have been passed down from sort of generation to generation. There's not all the hybridizing. When you say a hybrid, that's when you've got two separate parents, which are cross-pollinated to produce a specific outcome in it. These heirloom varieties, they're open-pollinated, so you can literally save the seeds from year to year and just pass them down through generations.
A couple heirlooms here, right?
And that's what happens, right? So we carry a big selection of these heirloom varieties as well. Again, I just brought a couple of them in for show and tell because again, you don't, well, first of all, if you wanted to grow them from seed, you're kind of late. That's something you need started a few weeks ago.
Well, and it's so convenient to have them in this form.
Right, and the fact of the matter is a lot of us, we're planting, 2, 3, 4, 5 tomatoes, and we want to mix different varieties. So this allows you just to come in and buy a mix of individual varieties. So, I just grabbed a couple that looked interesting in there. The Cherokee Purple, which is again, it just looks like a tomato plant, but this is one that's a big meaty tomato. It's late in the season, wonderful flavor in there. That's been one of my favorites as far as taste and flavor. This cherry black tomato is one I'm thinking maybe I got to grow that because I'm so enticed by the picture of a black tomato and stuff. That's the fun part of experimenting with these different things. Now, what I will tell you is, as much fun as these heirloom varieties are, they generally don't produce as much. They have a lower yield that goes in there, and that's been the biggest thing that I find. So some of these heirloom varieties like that Cherokee Purple, I might only get 5 or 6 tomatoes from a plant. So where now I'm more interested in, hey, I need more production, so a lot of times I go back more towards the hybrids, because the hybrids are more vigorous, higher in their productivity, and also a little more pest resistant. So this is a picture kind of segueing in some of the pest problems. This is a disease that's called late blight. Late blight's been sort of an increasing problem for tomato production. This is, in ways, it's a variant of the same pathogen that caused the potato famine, the Irish potato famine. Mm-hmm. So I don't exactly want to say this is a new disease, but what's new is it kind of has mutated a little bit, and again, sort of starting in the early 2000s, last 10 years or so, it's kind of spread and become a problem in tomato varieties. So one of the things that you can do is, some of the hybrid varieties are a little more resistant to it. It's important that we clean our vegetables out. You don't want old fruit lying on the ground. It starts a lot of times as a leaf spot that you're seeing. It can spread into the fruit, causing those rotting spots, and get in the stem and causes a canker, and then the whole vine dies. So you want to make sure you maintain good, clean environment that's in there. You can also use, there's fungicides. Copper is a natural product used for control of it. Other pests that have caused us some problems in the past, this is the brown marmorated stink bug. It was introduced from overseas accidentally, again found in Virginia several years ago, really became pretty widespread about 3 years ago. And what happens, its mouthpiece, it pokes it into the fruit, and every place where it pokes it in there to sort of suck some of the juices out of the tomato, that causes an area to sort of rot around it. Mm-hmm. And this thing, when you're growing vegetables, guess what? Everybody else wants them too, including the bugs that are out there. So I think what we need to do really is, where we can, provide good environment, give them plenty of sunlight, keep the plants well spread apart so that the air can circulate around them. I love being able to grow them on stakes or cages to keep them upright and off the ground, keeping the soil mulch to reduce splashing. And if we can provide good growing conditions, then a lot of these problems really don't get that far out of hand. Now, another great warm season plant to be growing, of course, because we showed that giant squash, what we call the cucurbit family. That includes,
I love that term.
Right.
Cucurbit.
Yeah, it does. It feels good to say.
Does,
That's why I have to. It's not jargon. We just like to say it.
That's right.
But cucumbers, squash, melons are all in this kind of family. These are for the most part, they're vines. So you can see the cucumbers are growing up on the trellis. And that little window box is a compact variety that's called a bush cucumber. Gives full-size cucumbers, but you can grow them in containers. So, again, anybody can grow these. It doesn't take that much space. Their big pest problem is the squash vine borer. That's a moth that flies around, lays her eggs in the base of the stem, and then the caterpillar tunnels and chews into it. Again, there's different control strategies, but one that I like to use a lot just for pest management in vegetable gardens is the row cover. This is just a very lightweight spun blanket that you throw over top of the plants. That keeps the pests off of it. When the plants start to reach maturity, when they're blooming stage, I can pull that cover off of it, and then that allows access for the pollinators to get in there. This can also provide a little light protection on the chilly nights, so that's good. And then one other bug that I have to show you super quick is this cucumber beetle. And I say it because I'd never encountered it before. It looks like a Mexican bean beetle, but it was feeding on cucumbers. So we had this outbreak last year, and I started looking into it. And I found that these are, pretty plainly to see, very closely related to ladybugs. Mm-hmm. So you have two species, the cucumber beetle and the Mexican bean beetle, feed on plants. But then, of course, you have the ladybugs, which are beneficial insects, and those ladybugs, which we have those for sale also. We sell ladybugs and praying mantids and worms, and these are beneficial insects that you want to have in the garden. So they look close, but always do a good job on getting them identified correctly, so we're not killing the wrong bugs that are out there.
Great. Well, we're going to have to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to take your phone calls, but we'll also share a little recipe with you to enjoy all of these. So 703-387-1046. So give us a call, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Merrifield's Gardening Advisor. We're taking your phone calls during the last part of the show here, 703-387-1046. So give us a call. But before we do, we've showed you the fun of growing these herbs and veggies, but what's even better is being able to use them and enjoy them. So Chef Taylor, who's usually at our Fair Oaks location, has what she calls the ultimate green smoothie recipe. And I know Chris, who works with us in their graphic design, is big. He has a smoothie every morning. So he went and made this recipe. So he just took a beautiful picture of the ingredients. And we've got the recipe card, but you're probably not going to be able to see that. But if you go to our website, merrifieldgardencenter.com, we'll have that. Both, if you go to the section where you see the shows, where we archive the shows, you can see it on our outline, and also under the recipe section, that should be up there. I didn't check to make sure that got up there, but basically it's using spinach leaves, kale, a banana, strawberries, Greek yogurt. She uses a fruit juice smoothie to start, a Bolthouse Farms green, and some honey if you need it, and you're basically pureeing it all together. And you forgot to bring the smoothie for us to drink today.
I don't make smoothies. I mean, I love them if somebody makes for them, and that's why I'm good friends with
Chris Draco also.
With Chef Taylor, because she keeps me well fed with her.
That's right.
She's trying the recipes out and stuff.
Great.
But I went to her and I said, hey, something that might be in the garden now, and so we started talking about things like kale and spinach and some of the greens that might be available to you now, and it was her idea to put them into a green smoothie.
That's great.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Nutritious, tasty food.
Absolutely. Fun. Okay, we're getting ready to take your phone calls, and actually our first caller, David, is Emma, who's calling from Triangle. Hi, Emma. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Good to hear
morning.
from you.
We're doing great.
Good. Well, you answered my question about what the problem was with my holly bushes, looking like somebody cleaned out the fireplace and dumped it on them.
Yeah, it's a good description.
Oh, yeah. But I have hostas that are coming up below the holly bushes. Are the two products that you mentioned, the Bear and the All Seasons, safe to apply with the hostas coming up?
Yes, the All Seasons oil, you can really use that pretty much on almost anything, including vegetables and flowers and trees and shrubs. It's a natural product. Now that Bear product, you don't want to use that where you're growing any kind of food crops. I don't want to use it anywhere close to the vegetable or herb garden. But around hosta and other ornamentals, it would be just fine.
Okay, and are we still to avoid impatiens because of the downy mildew?
Well, it's a personal choice. At Merrifield, we've chosen not to carry them. Part of our concern is we know that those spores can persist in the soil for up to 5 years. So I was talking to somebody even yesterday. 3 years ago, she had her whole collection, in her garden wiped out. And I was saying, well, the spores are still there. They're in the soil. If you replant with impatiens, be prepared to deal with the mildew. So we're just taking it, step at a time, but we've chosen, again, not to make them available this year. I think that's the cautious thing to do.
Okay. All right. Well, you guys have a good weekend.
Thanks.
Okay.
You too.
Okay.
Thanks for calling.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, Steve is calling from Burke. Hi, Steve. How are you this morning?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. What can we do for you?
I'm calling in about tomatoes and soil. I started tomato seeds from seeds this year, and they're about 3 inches tall. A couple weeks ago, right before that last blast of winter, I set them outside during the day to get some water, and I brought them into the garage. And I'm looking at the leaves, and they're kind of brownish, and I don't know whether the soil got too wet and they're starting to get leaf rot or root rot, or they got the wind burn from them. And I'm wondering also, is it safe to add a perlite to existing potting soil to help the soil dry out a little faster?
Yeah. So if I'm here, when you say brownish, is this just on the upper surface of the leaf, around the edges, or is it spotted?
It's on the edges.
Yeah. When it's around the edges like that, that could have been just even a little bit of exposure to the wind and the elements that's out there. The other possibility, let me ask, so these are in pots and they do have drainage, right? So the water can freely flow
Correct.
through there? Yeah, because sometimes that can also be excessive salts or fertilizer building up in there. But if it has good drainage in there, I'm going to say it's probably not a pest problem or disease or anything like that. It's most likely a part of that acclimating to the outdoors. And in this case, even though I know that it wasn't too cold out there, it could have been just exposure to the windy conditions. So I'm going to say they're going to grow out of there. For me, tomatoes, I'm probably going to wait another week before I really think about planting them out in the garden, in the soil.
And just to follow up with that too as well, if pots appear to be too moist after a day or two, is it safe to add perlite to the pots and also perlites to a raised bed that was just built?
Oh yes, and that perlite's a good option to help to enhance the drainage. So if you want to repot them, lift them out of there, you know, basically mix up a little more perlite into there and repot them, you can do that. But I guess a part of my thinking was that hopefully they're only in those pots for another week, and then you might be able to plant them out in their raised bed. So you have to decide, is it worth the time and effort to take them out, remix the soil, if you're going to be planting them out in your raised bed in another week or so.
Okay, great.
Yeah, it sounds like he's watching the weather well. Great job.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good luck with the tomatoes.
Great. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk to CJ. So hang tight there, CJ. We'll be right back. Our hour is flying by, so let's get right back to our caller. CJ is calling from Washington, D.C. Thanks for holding heat. CJ, how are you?
I'm fine this morning. How are you?
Great, thanks.
Doing great.
Okay, my question is about mulch for vegetables and herbs. What do you recommend?
Well, again, I get that question all the time, and it's a good question. I think it's really a lot of this just has to do with personal preference, you know, budget, those kind of things. There's really no one best mulch that's out there. Mm-hmm. Usually what we're doing in a vegetable garden is looking for something that's very economical. Something that I found works really well is I'll put down just a layer, just 1 or 2 papers thick of newspaper as kind of a weed block, and then putting straw on top of it. And that's very economical and it's very effective. It's not necessarily the prettiest thing. So where I'm gardening now, and I'm in a small townhouse garden, the same mulch that I use in my ornamental beds, the Virginia Fines pine bark mulch, and you'll hear a lot of people say, oh no, you can't do that. Well, I do it every single year because now it's important that it actually looks attractive to me that's out there. So it really just comes down to personal preference. The pine straw, those pine needles, make an excellent mulch in the vegetable garden too. It stays loose, it's well drained, it's aerated. But really, it just comes down to personal preference.
Okay, and this is in the containers because I do a lot of my herb and vegetable gardening in containers.
Yeah, in a container, you probably don't want to be doing straw or pine bale or anything bulk like that. So really, any of the bark products, again, I don't care whether it's cedar mulch, cypress mulch, shredded hardwood mulch, the pine bark mulch, even just compost. A lot of people compost. It's not as effective as far as deterring weeds and that type of thing. Mm-hmm. But if you're in containers and it's not a high maintenance thing with weeding, just having a little thin layer of compost on top helps to enrich the soil and it keeps the roots moist.
Okay, and you did say that it's a good thing to line your containers with a little landscape fabric, right? Did you say that or did Peggy say that?
That's Peggy.
Okay.
You know, and I'm not going to disagree with her, but I don't do that. Everybody's got their own approach to gardening.
Okay.
I think the thing that's really important is that the container has a drainage hole that's in there.
Uh-huh.
And so water can easily escape from there. You know, your soil's not going to pour through there. I think one of her primary reasons for doing that, as I've heard her talk about, where she's a gardens, she has a lot of trouble with little critters crawling up into the pots. Mm-hmm. And I think she uses that as a barrier so they don't crawl up through the drainage holes.
Okay, now one more question really quick, and this is it. I planted some seeds a couple of weeks ago, and when I started getting little flowers and everything, they were lettuce and cucumber. And then when I got ready to open them up, there was some mold and fuzzy stuff. What was that, and what did I do wrong?
Now, was this mold on the plants or on the surface of the soil?
Well, it was really like on the around the pot. It was around the little, you know, those pots that you can just go ahead and put in the ground.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. It was around, and then when I looked, I kind of peeled it off, and some of it was on the soil.
Okay. Yeah, you didn't necessarily do anything wrong. When the compost, the organic matter that's in that soil, you know, when you're doing your germination, when it's warm and it's moist, the fungi that cause that material to break down and decompose will grow on the surface of the soil, the edge of the pots. That's not a plant pathogen. You did exactly the right thing. You can just kind of scrape it off, and it should not be a problem.
Okay, then.
Thanks, CJ.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, we'll quickly get to Alta, who's calling from Hyattsville. Hi, we've just got a couple minutes left. Do you have something quick?
Yes. Hello?
Yes, how can we help you?
Yes, I thank you for what you do for all of us, for so many of us.
Thank
Oh,
you.
thank you.
I have a question about pussy willow. I bought some, put it in water, and it has rooted.
Right.
And I was wondering what conditions it most likes.
Yeah, well, pussy willow, like I said, is very easy to propagate that way. It grows into a very large shrub, and this is why you don't see it used that often. Pussy willow can easily get, 10 to 15 feet tall and wide, so you need to have a lot of space for it. It does best in a sunny condition and moist soils, but if you have room for it to grow, it can be a nice thing to put in the landscape. It's pretty dull looking most of the year. The only time it's really attractive is in early spring when those branches are coming out, when those buds are emerging. But if you like to use it in floral arrangements and such, and you've got a kind of out-of-the-way place with some space for it, go for it.
Thank you so very much. Again, I can't thank you enough for what you do for many of us.
Well, we enjoy it, and we love hearing from you, so thanks for calling in and sharing that.
And
Take care. Have a great weekend. Well, my apologies to Pamela and Ann, who we just have run out of time. If you'll stay on the line, we'll get to the number, and if you wouldn't mind giving a call back,
I'd be
that
happy
would be
to do
great. So thank you for joining us. Hope we've inspired you to get out there and do some veggie and herb gardening. Next week is Mother's Day coming up, so we're going to talk about some beautiful flowers for Mother's Day.
Oh yeah, and we got lots and lots of flowers, so you definitely want to watch, and we'll try to touch on every part of the garden center.
Absolutely. So come on over. We're going to, like I said, we're going to run over to the Fair Oaks location, stop by and say hi. Come to any of our locations. We'd love to see you come in. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.